They said every soul had a price. Hers was written in ink, sealed in silence, and sold beneath a chandelier that had seen too many broken promises. Alina Duarte didn't hear the gavel. She heard only the rasp of her father's breath, thin, desperate, as he slid the papers across the table toward men whose suits smelled of smoke and iron. The name printed at the bottom made the air in the room contract. Rafael Moretti. The stories about him were legend. The billionaire who built empires from ashes, who smiled only when the markets bled. They said he never lost business, battles, or people. Some swore he had no heart at all. Her father's hand trembled when he spoke. He'll keep you safe. Alina, this settles everything. She wanted to scream that nothing about this was safe, but the words curdled on her tongue. She saw the fear in his eyes, the kind of fear that wasn't for himself anymore, and so she signed. The pen felt heavier than a weapon. By dusk, a convoy of black cars waited outside the crumbling villa. The ocean wind carried the scent of salt and iron, the same taste that filled her mouth when she bit back tears. A man in a tailored coat opened the door for her. Miss Duarte, Mr. Moretti sends his regards. His voice was flat, mechanical. Alina slid into the leather interior and watched her home shrink into the distance. Behind her, debts were erased. Ahead, her life was rewritten. The road wound north along the cliffs, the headlights cutting through fog like knives. No one spoke. The driver's eyes never left the asphalt, and the silence pressed against her until even her heartbeat sounded too loud. Hours later, the car stopped before wrought iron gates taller than the trees. Beyond them, a mansion rose against the horizon, part fortress, part museum. Every window blazed with gold light, and still the place looked cold. As the gates groaned open, the driver said quietly, "Welcome to Villa Rosa." Inside, everything gleamed: marble floors, staircases curling like ribbons, chandeliers that caught the moon. Servants moved soundlessly, their eyes down. The air smelled of citrus and control. A woman in black guided her through corridors that seemed to multiply. "You'll be shown to your quarters. Mr. Moretti doesn't appreciate lateness, noise, or defiance. Dinner is served at 8. Defiance. The word almost made Alina laugh. It was the only thing she had left. Her room waited at the end of a long hall, lavish, enormous, and empty. A bed dressed in white silk, a balcony overlooking the violent sea. The sound of waves struck the cliffs like applause for someone else's tragedy. She touched the curtain fabric, the carved wood of vanity, the smooth porcelain of the basin, each perfect, each foreign. None of it belonged to her. When she finally looked in the mirror, the girl staring back seemed made of another world's light. Pale, brittle, suspended between fear and fury. She whispered to the reflection, "You will survive this." Outside, the wind rose. She didn't notice the footsteps until they stopped at her door. The handle turned slowly, as though testing her silence. Then he appeared. Rafael Moretti was not the monster she'd imagined. No scars, no cruel smile, just precision carved into flesh and bone. His presence filled the room the way thunder fills the sky before it breaks. "Miss Duarte." His accent softened her name, but didn't warm it. "I trust the journey was tolerable." She stood straighter. Was that a question or a statement? He regarded her like an equation he intended to solve. An observation. "You look unafraid. Maybe fear isn't the currency you think it is." A flicker, brief, crossed his expression, something between surprise and amusement. "You'll learn eventually what is." He moved closer, and the space seemed to shrink with him. "You're here because your father made poor choices. I make sure poor choices don't repeat." Alina's pulse drummed against her throat. "So you buy people now?" "I buy silence," he said. "Loyalty. Peace. Peace doesn't look like a cage." His gaze sharpened, but he didn't answer. For a heartbeat, neither of them breathed. The storm outside cracked the horizon, lightning glancing off the glass and lighting the room in white fire. Then he spoke, quieter. "Dinner is in 1 hour. Someone will bring you clothes. Wear something that tells the truth." He left as suddenly as he'd arrived, his footsteps dissolving into marble. Alina stared at the door long after it closed. The echo of his voice lingered, calm, measured, dangerous. And beneath it, something she hadn't expected to feel at all. Curiosity. She didn't move for a long while. The silence pressed against her skin until it felt like the walls themselves were listening. Finally, she walked to the balcony and pushed open the doors. The night air poured in, cold, salted, almost violent. Below her, waves crashed against the rocks, scattering spray like shattered glass. Alina gripped the railing. Where's something that tells the truth? What did truth even look like here? Her life was a lie signed in her father's handwriting. Her freedom traded for numbers she'd never see. Maybe the only truth left was the one that refused to die inside her, the part that still wanted to fight. She opened the wardrobe. Silk dresses, evening gowns, jewels that could ransom small countries. She chose none of them. Instead, she found a plain black dress, elegant but unadorned, a quiet rebellion in a house built on display. When she stepped into the dining hall, the first thing she noticed was a sound. Not music, but absence. The kind of hush that makes you aware of your own breathing. The table stretched the length of the room, laid with silver and crystal. At the far end sat Raphael Moretti, reading something by candlelight. He didn't look up right away. You're punctual. I assumed you'd appreciate that, she said, taking the seat opposite. I appreciate discipline, he replied. Whether you possess it remains to be seen. A server poured wine. She didn't touch it. The smell of roasted herbs and citrus filled the air, but she could taste nothing but tension. Raphael finally lifted his eyes. They were the color of storm water, gray with something darker moving beneath. Tell me, he said, what you think you know about me. She almost laughed. You mean apart from the fact that you buy people to settle debts? His expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened slightly on the glass stem. Go on. They call you ruthless. Brilliant. Dangerous. The kind of man who mistakes control for safety. He set the glass down. And you? Do you mistake defiance for freedom? I mistake nothing, she said softly. I'm here because I was sold. That doesn't make me yours. The words hung between them, sharp as knives. He should have been furious. She expected it. Instead, Raphael leaned back, studying her like a scholar facing a new theorem. You have no idea how rare honesty is in this house, he said. Most people give me what I want before I ask. You give me what I didn't ask for at all. I'm not most people. No, he murmured. You're not. For a moment, the air changed. The storm outside groaned across the glass walls, thunder rolling close enough to feel. Candlelight trembled between them, flickering gold across his features. She saw the exhaustion beneath the polish, the faint shadow of something broken hiding in his composure. He caught her staring. If you plan to survive here, stop looking at me like you want to understand. Maybe I already do. Raphael rose, abruptly, chair scraping against the marble. Your room is secure. You will not leave the estate without my permission. In time, perhaps we'll discuss what that means. He started toward the door, then paused. Eat. The staff will remove the plates in 30 minutes. I dislike waste. After he was gone, Alina exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The chandeliers hummed faintly, catching the last echo of thunder. She touched the fork, the edge of the plate, the stem of the untouched wine glass. Every piece of this world gleamed, but none of it shone. Somewhere deep in the house, she heard footsteps again, his measured and unhurried. And against her will, she wondered where he went when the halls swallowed him. That night, she lay awake listening to the sea. Sleep would not come. Each crash of the tide sounded like the echo of her name, whispered through the walls. Alina. She turned on the lamp, its glow soft against the dark. On the desk lay an envelope she hadn't noticed before, sealed with wax. Her name was written in precise ink. Inside, a single line. A cage can be broken from within, if you are brave enough. There was no signature, but she knew whose hand had written it. Her heartbeat quickened. For the first time since the contract was signed, fear and intrigue burned together in her chest. Outside, dawn began to stain the horizon. Somewhere in the mansion, Raphael Moretti stood before the window of his study, watching the same sunrise. He didn't know why he'd written the note, only that something about the girl's defiance had unsettled a silence he'd lived in for years. He told himself it was curiosity, that it would pass. But as the first light spilled across the sea and reached the edges of Villa Rosa, both of them felt the same unfamiliar shift, the quiet beginning of something neither had intended. And beneath the sound of waves and distant thunder, the story of their undoing had already begun to write itself. Morning came slowly to Villa Rosa. The mansion woke like a creature stretching after a long slumber, curtains breathing, doors sighing open, footsteps stirring in the endless halls. Yet even in daylight, the house felt cold, not from the weather, but from the weight of the rules that lived inside it. Alina opened her eyes to the sound of the ocean clawing at the cliffs below. The waves had no mercy, no rhythm, only persistence. She wondered if they ever grew tired of breaking. Her first morning in the mansion felt like waking inside a painting. Too still, too perfect, too wrong. The servants moved like shadows, appearing when needed, vanishing before she could thank them. Breakfast appeared on the table beside her bed. Fruit arranged like jewels, bread so delicate it seemed sinful to touch. But the food tasted of nothing. When she finally stepped into the corridor, the light seemed colder than night. The walls whispered in polished marble tones, lined with portraits of strangers who might have been ancestors or victims. It was hard to tell which. Every corner of Villa Rosa spoke of control, symmetry, precision, silence. And somewhere in the heart of it all, the man who owned it like he owned air itself. She found him not in an office or a meeting room, but in the greenhouse, a cathedral of glass clinging to the edge of the cliffs. He stood among white roses, sleeves rolled up, pruning shears in one hand. The sight startled her. Raphael Moretti, the man who moved millions with a glance, tending flowers with careful precision. He didn't turn when she entered. "You're early," he said. "I didn't realize there was a schedule." "There's always a schedule. You'll learn it soon enough." She hesitated. "You grow your own roses?" "They require order," he replied. "Unlike people. Order isn't life," she said quietly. This time he looked up. "No, it's survival." He cut another stem, sharp and clean, and handed her the bloom. "Do you know why white roses are my favorite?" "Because they look purer?" "Because they die the fastest," he said. "Reminds me that beauty doesn't owe us time." She stared at the flower in her hand. Perfect, fragile, trembling in the breeze. "Maybe it's not beauty that dies," she murmured. "Maybe it's the people who don't know how to keep it alive." He studied her for a long moment, then turned back to the roses. "You speak like someone who hasn't lost enough." "And you," she said, "like someone who's lost too much." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It hummed with something unspoken, a current neither of them knew how to name. When he finally spoke again, his tone had changed. "You're free to walk the estate. The staff will accompany you. But there are places you do not go." "Why?" "Because I said so." "And if I don't listen?" He faced her fully now, eyes cold as the sea below. "Then I'll have to remind you why people don't cross me." She didn't flinch. "Maybe I'd like to find out." For a second, he almost smiled. Then he set the shears down and walked past her, the scent of roses trailing after him like memory. When he was gone, Alina breathed again. She looked at the flowers still trembling in her hand. A single thorn pricked her skin, and a drop of blood bloomed against the white petals. It was the first thing in this house that felt alive. Later that day, she wandered the mansion's endless halls. Portraits of Moretti ancestors watched from the walls. Men and women painted in triumph, draped in wealth, their smiles stiff as marble. Every so often, she'd pass a locked door. No keys, no handles, just quiet warnings in the form of iron and shadow. Near the end of one corridor, she discovered a library. Books climbed to the ceiling, a mountain of ink and forgotten worlds. The air smelled of cedar and secrets. She reached for a book at random, Inferno by Dante, and when she opened it, a folded letter fell from between the pages. The handwriting was old, the ink faded, but the name at the bottom froze her, Raphael Moretti. The letter wasn't addressed to him. It was from him. "Forgive me for building my empire on your grave." The rest was torn away. Before she could read more, a shadow fell across the page. Raphael stood in the doorway, unreadable. You're in a restricted room. She turned the letter over in her hand. So I've noticed. Who gave you permission to enter? No one, she said. The door was open. It shouldn't have been. He walked toward her, slow, deliberate. What did you read? Just enough to know you're human. His jaw tightened. That's a dangerous assumption. She stepped closer, the letter still between them. Maybe, but you wouldn't hide pain if you didn't feel it. Something flashed behind his eyes, anger, maybe grief. But before she could see which, he took the letter from her hand and tore it in two. This conversation never happened. Why? She demanded. Who was she? He turned away. Someone I should have protected. When he looked back, his expression was made of steel again. Stay out of the library. And then he left, the torn paper fluttering to the floor like feathers from a wounded bird. That night, Alina couldn't sleep. The mansion's silence pressed against her chest like weight. Every creak sounded like footsteps, every whisper wind like breath behind her ear. Somewhere far below, the waves crashed against the rocks, restless and hungry. She left her room barefoot, wrapped in a silk shawl, and wandered through the corridors guided only by the dim light spilling from chandeliers. The air was colder here, alive with ghosts she couldn't name. Down one hallway, she found a door slightly ajar, the faint scent of salt and smoke drifting through it. Inside was a small study, walls lined with maps and old photographs. She recognized Raphael's handwriting on the scattered papers, notes, figures, coded transactions, and then, among them, a single picture, a woman, blonde, laughing, standing in the same greenhouse where Alina had met him. The photo was old, sun-bleached, edges curling. On the back, one word written in black ink, Lucia. The name pulsed through her mind like a heartbeat. Before she could put the photo down, she heard a low voice from the doorway. You're not very good at following rules. Alina froze. Raphael leaned against the frame, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, the kind of casual that still felt dangerous. I couldn't sleep, she said. So you decided to invade my past. I didn't mean to. He stepped closer. You meant to understand me. That's worse. His eyes flickered toward the photograph in her hand. For the first time, she saw something break in him. A fracture in the armor. Was she your wife? Alina asked softly. Raphael nodded once. She was everything. What happened to her? Everything, he said again. Then quieter. And I wasn't enough to save her. Silence filled the room, thick and alive. Alina placed the photo back on the desk, gently, as though touching something sacred. Maybe you can't save the past, she said, but you don't have to keep living in it. He looked at her then, really looked. And what do you know about loss, Alina? Enough, she whispered, to know it doesn't end when the grave closes. He exhaled, slow, a sound between surrender and exhaustion. You think I'm cruel. I think you're afraid, she said. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fear built this empire. Maybe it's time to build something else. Raphael took a step closer. Too close. His breath brushed her cheek. Careful. People who talk like that to me don't last long. Then maybe, she said, meeting his gaze, you've been talking to the wrong kind of people. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The air between them shifted, charged, alive. Then he stepped back, his expression unreadable. Go to bed, Alina. She didn't move. You don't scare me. You should, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I don't know what I'd do if you didn't. He turned and left before she could respond. When the door shut, the photograph of Lucia caught the light, and for a second, Alina thought she saw her own reflection in it. Haunted, searching, alive. The following days passed like the slow turn of a tide. The house began to reveal its moods, soft light in the mornings, storms at night, music drifting faintly from somewhere she could never find. Raphael was everywhere and nowhere. One moment he'd pass her in the hall with a curt nod, the next she'd find in the gardens, sleeves rolled, tending to the roses as though each one held secret. But the tension between them, unspoken, undeniable, grew with every glance. One evening, while the sky bled gold into the horizon, she found herself standing in the greenhouse again. The air was heavy with the scent of rain and earth. She touched the glass walls, tracing raindrops with her finger. Behind her, a voice said, "You like this place." She turned. Raphael stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. "It feels alive," she said, "unlike the rest of this house." He walked closer, his gaze steady. "Maybe that's why I built it here, to remind myself something still can be." She smiled faintly. "You hide your heart in flowers." "And you," he said, "hide your fear in defiance." They stood there, inches apart, thunder rolling in the distance. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "Why by me of all people?" He hesitated. "Because you reminded me of her. At first. Now," he said quietly, "you remind me of everything I thought I could never feel again." Her breath caught. "And what is that?" "Hope." The word lingered between them like a promise and a warning. Then the storm broke. Lightning flashed, rain slamming against the glass. Raphael reached for the windows to close them, but the wind fought back. Alina moved beside him, their hands brushing as they secured the frames. When the last latch clicked, they turned toward each other, close enough to feel each other's breath. Neither spoke. Raphael's hand brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You should stay inside tonight," he murmured. "Why?" "Because the sea gets wild during storms," he said, "and I don't want to lose anything else to it." She searched his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't see the feared billionaire the world whispered about. She saw a man who had built walls to keep the ghosts out and somehow trapped himself inside them. "I'm not something you can lose," she whispered. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hurt. "You say that now." The storm raged around them, the air thick with electricity. And though neither moved closer, something between them had already crossed the line. Outside, the sea roared its approval. Inside, two broken hearts began to beat in rhythm for the first time. The storm passed, but the silence it left behind felt louder than thunder. The morning after, the mansion was wrapped in a strange calm, one that tasted too much like warning. Alina walked through the glass corridor that led to the gardens. The air still smelled of rain, earth, and something else she couldn't name. The ocean below the cliffs had quieted, but the wind hummed against the windows, whispering secrets only the brave or the foolish would try to understand. She had begun to feel the rhythm of Villa Rosa, the way the staff moved like clockwork, the exact moments when Raphael disappeared into his private wing, and the times when the entire house seemed to hold its breath. And yet, that morning, something was wrong. The light flickered. Once, then again. Not enough to panic, but enough to make her pause. She pressed her hand against the glass, peering out toward the garden. For a second, she thought she saw a movement, something shifting just beyond the orchids, where the shadows were deepest. Her pulse quickened. It wasn't one of the guards. She had learned their routes, their patterns. Whoever was moved differently, too quiet, too sure. "Raphael?" she called softly. No answer. She took a step back, her reflection glimmering against the glass. Then it happened again, the faint sound of gravel beneath a foot, too close to be imagined. The shape moved. Tall, fast, intentional. Fear surged through her veins like ice. She turned and ran, her bare feet silent on the tile. The air inside the house was colder than before, sharp with tension. She reached the main hallway, gasping, when a voice cut through the dark. "Alina?" She collided into Raphael's chest. His hands closed around her arms instantly. "What happened?" "There's someone outside," she breathed. "In the garden. Watching me." His expression changed, anger folding into focus. "Stay here." She caught his sleeve. "Wait! Don't go alone." But he was already gone. Alina ran after him, heart pounding. The mansion came alive around them. Guards rushing through the corridors, lights flaring on across the grounds. Orders echoed through the comms, Raphael's voice sharp and commanding. "Perimeter sweep. Check every angle. Now!" She watched from the doorway as men with flashlights cut through the night, the rain-soaked grass gleaming beneath their boots. The waves below the cliffs roared louder, as though the sea itself wanted to be heard. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. When Raphael returned, his shirt was damp, his eyes fierce. "Nothing," he said. "No one." Alina shook her head. "I saw him. I know I did. I believe you." The words stopped her breath. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear them. He guided her inside, poured her a glass of water, and sat across from her. "If someone was here," he said, "it wasn't random. This place is protected. It means they knew how to get close, or they wanted to send a message." He hesitated. "Last week, I refused an offer from the Black Ridge Consortium. They wanted to buy one of my security arms. They didn't take it well." "Are you saying this is business?" "In my world," he said, "everything is." She set the glass down, her fingers trembling slightly. "Then I shouldn't be here." He looked up sharply. "You're not leaving." "Why not, if I'm a target?" "Because I don't run," he said. Then softer, "And I don't let anyone take what's mine." Her voice trembled with anger. "I'm not something you own." He didn't respond immediately. His gaze fell to her hand, where the faint scar from the rose thorn still lingered. He reached out, his touch careful. "No," he said finally, "you're not. But I don't want to lose you either." The confession hung between them like a fragile flame. For the first time since she had been brought to the mansion, she saw the truth behind the man, the cracks beneath the marble. "I thought I built a fortress," Raphael said quietly. "Made of power, money, control. But tonight, when I couldn't find you, I realized it's not walls that keep us safe. It's people." Alina looked at him, eyes glistening with something she refused to name. "And what happens when those people leave?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that broke your heart, because you knew it came from pain. "Then I build a door wide enough and come back." She wanted to speak, to tell him that love and pain were too close in his world. But the words never came. Instead, he rose, walked toward her, and brushed his thumb gently over her cheek. "Get some rest," he said. "I'll make sure the guards double patrol." "I don't need more guards," she whispered. "I just need to know if I'm safe with you." The room went still. Raphael's eyes softened, and for once he didn't hide. "You are." He didn't leave that night. He stayed by the sitting room window until dawn, watching the sea while Alina slept on the couch, her hand resting near his. When morning came, the light found them both, two souls stitched together by fear, silence, and something neither dared to call love. Outside, the ocean crashed against the cliffs, relentless as ever. But inside Villa Rosa, the cold began to thaw. And for the first time since her arrival, Alina dreamed, not of escape, but of something terrifyingly close to hope. The rain returned 3 nights later, heavier than before. It struck the glass roof of the mansion like 1,000 restless hands, each drop a memory knocking to be let in. The sea below was wild again, raging against the cliffs as it tried to reclaim what men like Raphael Moretti had stolen from it. Control. Alina couldn't sleep. She stood by her window wrapped in a linen robe, the stormlight spilling over her face in flashes of silver. Every thunderclap reminded her of the night she'd seen the shadow in the garden, and every silence afterward reminded her that she wasn't the same woman who'd arrived here weeks ago. Something in her had shifted. Something in him had too. The mansion, once a mausoleum of rules, now breathed differently. The air was alive, charged with something delicate and dangerous. There was a knock on her door, soft, deliberate. She turned, expecting a servant, but when she opened it, Raphael stood there. His shirt was damp from the corridors, his hair tousled, eyes dark and unreadable. He held a glass of water, as if that were reason enough to appear in the middle of the night. "I couldn't sleep," he said quietly. "Storms don't usually bother you. This one does." He stepped inside without waiting for permission. She didn't stop him. The air between them tightened like the pause before lightning. For a long moment, neither spoke. She sat at the edge of the bed. He took the armchair near the window. The sound of rain filled the space between them. "I keep seeing it," he said finally, voice low. "You, standing alone in the greenhouse, afraid. I hate that I put you there." "You didn't," she replied softly. "The world did. You just built the walls around it." He looked down at his hands. I built the walls to keep people safe. No, she said. You built them to keep yourself from feeling. That silenced him. Outside, lightning flashed, revealing the storm's veins across the sky. When the thunder followed, it sounded like the world agreeing with her. I never meant for this to become what it did, he whispered. I told myself you were just a debt to be repaid, a business arrangement. But you ruined my logic. Her breath caught. Raphael stood and crossed the room. He stopped in front of her, every movement deliberate, like a man walking into a confession he couldn't take back. I brought you here because I wanted to punish the world for what it took from me, he said. But instead you reminded me what I'd buried. What did you bury? She asked. My heart, he said simply. Alina wanted to be angry, but her voice betrayed her. You can't just decide to feel again and expect it to fix everything. I don't expect it to fix anything, he said. I just don't want to keep pretending I don't feel it. He crouched down so they were eye level. The storm painted his face in streaks of shadow and light. You're not a cage, Alina, he murmured. You're the only thing that ever made me want to leave mine. She didn't move, didn't speak. The confession hung in the air like fragile glass. Slowly, she reached out and touched his cheek. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what came next. He leaned into her palm, a man surrendering to a softness he didn't think he deserved. The glass of water slipped from his other hand, forgotten on the floor. He took her hand in his, fingers tracing the faint scar from the rose thorn. When he kissed her, it wasn't hunger, it was history. Slow, careful, like he was afraid the moment would vanish if he breathed too hard. She responded not out of weakness, but recognition. This was the man she had feared, the man who had once held power over her, now unraveling in front of her because of her. The storm outside roared its approval. When they broke apart, neither spoke. Their foreheads touched, breaths mingling, hearts pounding in unison. I don't know what this means, she whispered. It doesn't have to mean anything yet, he said, just that it's real. They stayed like that, listening to the rain. When he finally pulled back, he smiled faintly. I should go. She nodded, though every part of her wanted him to stay. He paused at the door. I just needed to know if it was possible, he said. It is, she whispered. That's enough. He left without another word. The door closed softly behind him, but the echo of his presence lingered on her skin, in her breath, in the storm still raging outside. Alina sat there for a long time, fingers brushing her lips, heartbeat wild and unsteady. She didn't know what came next, but for the first time since stepping into this house, she didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt alive. Outside, the rain eased into a quiet drizzle. The sea softened, and dawn crept slowly along the horizon. In that fragile light, Alina realized something profound. Love wasn't supposed to make sense. It was supposed to make change. And in a mansion built by fear and power, change had finally begun. Morning came quiet and golden, the storm's memory fading into mist. Villa Rosa seemed gentler after the night before, as if the house itself had witnessed something sacred and was too reverent to disturb it. But beneath that calm, something new stirred, something fragile and terribly alive. Alina woke to the echo of her own heartbeat. The sheets still smelled faintly of rain, roses, and him. Raphael. She closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing, but her mind refused to obey. His confession still echoed through her, every word carving itself deeper into her ribs. I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel it. It should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like the truth she'd been waiting for without knowing it. She dressed slowly and stepped into the corridor. The staff greeted her with quiet nods, their eyes avoiding hers, though she could feel the whisper of curiosity that followed wherever she walked. In the greenhouse, the morning light glowed soft through the glass. The roses, those flawless, silent witnesses, seemed to tilt toward her, as though they, too, remembered what had happened between them. But Raphael was nowhere to be found. Hours passed. By noon, unease began to take root. She asked from the guards, "Where's Mr. Moretti?" The man hesitated. "In the city, Signora. Unexpected business." "Business?" she repeated. "Yes. He left before sunrise." She turned away before the guard, could see her disappointment. The silence that followed her down the hall was heavier than any storm. She tried to distract herself, wandering to the library, the endless rooms, even the grand piano room she had never dared enter before. Her fingers brushed over the ivory keys, and before she realized it, she was playing a melody from another life, something her mother used to hum when nights felt too long. The sound filled the room like a memory made flesh. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were right behind her. "That piece," said a voice she didn't recognize, "was your mother's favorite, wasn't it?" Alina froze. The man who stood there was tall, impeccably dressed, but there was something unsettling in his calm. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sorry," she said cautiously. "Who are you?" He stepped closer, inspecting the books and decor as though he already owned them. "A friend of Raphael's," he said smoothly. "Call me Victor." Her chest tightened. "I wasn't told there'd be visitors." "That's because I'm not the kind of visitor people announce." Before she could respond, he leaned casually against the piano. "You must be the girl," he said. "The one they said he bought." Her pulse spiked. "That's not what happened." He smiled faintly. "No? Then tell me, what had happened?" Alina stood, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "Who are you, really?" Victor chuckled. "You can relax. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to remind Raphael that business doesn't disappear just because he's found a new distraction." The word hit like a slap. He turned toward the window, glancing out over the cliffs. "He's changed, you know. Used to be ruthless, efficient. Now, he's sentimental. Dangerous thing, love. It makes men forget who they are." "Maybe he needed to forget," she said. Victor's smile vanished. "Careful, Alina. You don't understand the world he comes from." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, folded document. "Give him this. Tell him his debts are due, and the consortium doesn't wait forever." Before she could stop him, he placed the paper on the piano and walked toward the door. "Don't trust him too much," he added without turning. "Men like Raphael don't fall in love, they consume." And then he was gone. The paper sat there, pale against the dark wood. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside, written in clean, elegant ink, was a single line that made her blood run cold. Payment required within 7 days. Failure to comply will result in asset retrieval. Below that, her name, Alina. She stared at the word until it blurred. Asset retrieval. That wasn't business language. It was a threat. When Raphael returned that evening, his car lights slicing through the fog, she was waiting for him at the front entrance. He barely had time to step out before she threw the document at his chest. "What is this?" He caught it, glanced down, and his face hardened instantly. "Where did you get this?" "From your friend, Victor. He said you'd know what it means." Raphael's jaw clenched. "You spoke to him?" "He found me," she snapped. "In your house. Don't turn this on me." He exhaled slowly, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. "I told you before, when I refused to sell to the consortium, I made enemies. They're trying to force me back in. By threatening me, they know I care about you." Her voice broke. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to scare you." She laughed bitterly. "You think I'm not scared now?" Raphael stepped closer, his eyes fierce with a kind of desperation she'd never seen before. "Listen to me. I can protect you. I will protect you. But you have to trust me." "How can I?" she whispered. "You built this world out of secrets." "Then let me tear it down," he said. "For you." His hand brushed hers, trembling. "I can't lose you, Alina. Not like I lost her." Something in his voice, broken, pleading, made her stop fighting. For the first time, she realized how deep his wounds went. She looked up at him, eyes soft but wary. "Then promise me," she said quietly. "No more lies." He nodded, voice rough. "No more lies." Outside, the wind rose again, whispering through the cracks of the mansion. The ocean growled below, as if warning them both that promises made in storms rarely survive the dawn. And yet, in that moment, neither cared. Raphael reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Somewhere in the dark, the world shifted again, love tangled with danger, truth bound to deceit. And though neither of them knew it yet, the secret that found its way into their lives would soon cost them both far more than they could imagine. Night fell like a blade, sharp, unforgiving. The waves below Villa Rosa pounded against the cliffs, furious and endless, as if echoing the storm building inside its walls. Raphael stood alone in his study, the consortium's letter crushed in his fist. The fireplace burned high, casting long shadows across the room, turning his reflection in the glass window into something monstrous. He'd thought he could control them, these men with endless wealth and no souls. He thought walking away from their empire would buy him peace. But peace was never something men like him were allowed to keep. And now, because of him, Alina was in danger. She stood at the doorway, her presence soft but unyielding. "You're blaming yourself again." He didn't turn. "Because it's my fault." "Raphael, I should have known they'd come for you," he said, voice raw. "They don't forgive disobedience." She stepped closer, her reflection joining his in the window. "Then let's stop waiting for them to strike. Let's end it." He looked at her then, really looked. "You don't know what that means." "Yes, I do," she said. "I've lived my whole life being powerless. I'm done running from people who think they can own me." Something fierce sparked in her eyes, something that reminded him of who he used to be before grief hollowed him out. He realized then that he didn't just want to protect her, he wanted to fight with her. He turned back to the desk, spreading out maps, documents, coded notes. The consortium runs its main operations through Blackridge Holdings. Offshore accounts, shell companies. Everything traces back to one man, Victor Lang, the one who came here. He nodded. He's not just a messenger. He's the blade they use when someone needs to disappear. "So what's the plan?" He hesitated, meeting her gaze. "You're not part of this." "The moment they wrote my name on that letter," she said, "I became part of it." For a moment, silence filled the room, thick, electric. Then Raphael sighed, surrendering to the inevitability of her resolve. "Fine," he said, "but you do exactly what I tell you. No improvising. No heroics." She smirked faintly. "You forget I never learned how to obey." A reluctant smile tugged at his lips, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Then may God help us both." The plan was simple in theory, impossible in execution. Raphael would attend a private auction hosted by the consortium at their coastal estate in Monaco, a front for laundering billions through art, weapons, and power. Alina would come disguised as his fiancée. Together, they would gather proof of Victor's crimes, enough to dismantle Blackridge from the inside. By the time they arrived, the air was thick with perfume and deceit. Chandeliers dripped with gold, violins hummed to the marble halls, and men in suits traded fortunes with their eyes. Alina moved beside Raphael with grace, her black gown trailing like midnight behind her. Every glance in her direction carried curiosity, envy, danger. "Smile," Raphael murmured under his breath. "They can smell fear." "I'm not afraid," she whispered back. He looked at her, and for the first time that night, he believed her. Victor appeared near the grand staircase, his expression polished, his charm deadly. When he saw them, his smile curved like a knife. "Ah, the prodigal son returns," he drawled, "and he brings his prize." Alina's hand tightened around Raphael's arm. "I came for business," Raphael said evenly. Victor chuckled. "Of course. You always were a man of reason. But tell me, Raphael, does she know what kind of man you really are?" "Careful," Raphael said, his tone ice. Victor leaned closer, lowering his voice. "She doesn't know about the fire, does she?" Alina stiffened. "What fire?" Raphael froze. Victor smiled like a serpent sensing blood. "He didn't tell you?" "Oh, that's right. You remind him too much of her." "Lucia," Alina whispered, the name tasting like betrayal. Victor nodded. "She died in a fire." His fire. Raphael's voice was sharp. "That's not true." "Oh, it's true enough," Victor said, stepping closer. He built this empire out of ashes, but the first thing he ever burned was his own heart. The room tilted. The music faded. Alina stepped back, her pulse roaring in her ears. "Tell me it's not true," she said, her voice breaking. Raphael's eyes, filled with guilt, pain, memory, answered before his words did. It was an accident. An accident? Victor laughed coldly. You were drunk, Moretti. You lit the fire yourself. You killed her. Raphael moved so fast that no one saw it coming. His fist slammed into Victor's jaw, sending him crashing into a table of glass and wine. Guests screamed. Guards reached for their weapons. Enough! Raphael roared, pulling Alina toward the exit. But before they could reach the door, Victor staggered to his feet, blood at his lip, madness in his grin. You can't run from your sins, Raphael, and she'll never forgive you once she knows the rest. Outside, they fled into the storm. Rain hit like bullets. Alina tore her arm free, spinning to face him. You killed her? His voice cracked. I tried to save her. I swear to God, Alina, I tried. But you didn't. No, he whispered. I didn't. Lightning split the sky. For a heartbeat, his face looked carved from ruin. She wanted to hate him, to walk away, but instead she saw something in his eyes, the same kind of torment that lived in her own reflection. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Because you look at me the way you are now, he said. I don't know how to look at you anymore, she admitted. He took a step forward. Then don't look at what I was. Look at what I'm trying to be. The rain softened, turning the air silver. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, quietly, Alina said, If you want me to stay, stop hiding behind your ghosts. Show me the truth, all of it. He nodded slowly. Then you should come with me. To where? To where it all began. By dawn, they were driving away from Monaco, past cities through forests, toward the countryside where Raphael's empire had been born and burned. The fire wasn't just in his past anymore. It was following them, and somewhere behind them, Victor watched their car disappear, a cruel smile curling on his lips. Let him run, he muttered. It only makes the hunt more interesting. The road wound to the mountains like a scar, endless, silent, and steeped in fog. The car's headlights cut through it in trembling arcs, illuminating fragments of a world that time had forgotten. Alina sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't ask where they were going anymore. She only listened. To the engine's hum, to Raphael's steady breathing, to the weight of truths still unsaid. Hours passed before the scenery began to change. The mountains fell away, revealing a valley where the air smelled of rain and rusted memory. There on the horizon stood what remained of Villa Lucin, Raphael's old estate, or rather what was left of it. The mansion was a skeleton of stone and smoke, its windows shattered, its gates eaten by ivy. The once beautiful gardens were nothing but charred earth and tangled roots. The silence that hung over it wasn't peaceful. It was haunted. This is where it happened, Raphael said quietly as he pulled to a stop. Alina stepped out, her boots crunching over the gravel. The air was cold, thin, sharp. She could almost taste the ghosts lingering there. The fire, she whispered. He nodded, his gaze distant. 10 years ago. They walked toward the ruins. The front doors had collapsed long ago, leaving only an open archway. As they stepped through it, a faint echo of the past seemed to breathe through the halls. Laughter, music, the softening of a life that no longer existed. What was she like? Alina asked softly. Raphael hesitated, his jaw tightening. Lucille was light, reckless. She made every room feel alive. And you loved her. He nodded once. I did, but not the way I should have. I was young, angry, desperate to prove myself. My father had just died, and the company was on the brink of collapse. I started working with people I shouldn't have. The consortium offered me a deal, quick money for silence. He paused, looking out across the wreckage. I didn't know that deal would cost her life. Alina's voice trembled. What happened that night? Raphael's eyes darkened, reflecting the dying embers of the fire he saw in his memory. We argued. She wanted to leave, to expose everything. I told her she didn't understand what we were up against. She threw the contract at me, said she'd rather be poor than live in a cage built on blood. He swallowed hard. There was a storm, lightning, wind. I was drunk. I threw the papers into the fireplace, and before I could stop it, the flames spread. The curtains caught, then the floor. Lucia ran upstairs to get something. A locket, I think. I went after her, but his voice broke. By the time I reached her, the ceiling had collapsed. Alina felt her chest tighten, the air around them growing heavier. You couldn't have saved her, she said softly. He looked at her with hollow eyes. But I could have stopped it from starting. They stood in silence for a long time. The only sound was the wind moving through the ruins like an elegy. Then Alina said something that surprised even herself. You built this house again, didn't you? Villa Rosa, it's the same design. He nodded slowly. I thought rebuilding it might rewrite what happened, but the walls always remembered. She turned to him, her voice fragile but steady. And what about now? Are you rebuilding again with me? He looked at her, truly looked, as if seeing her for the first time since the night they met. I don't know, he admitted, but for the first time I want to. Before she could respond, a noise cut through the quiet, the crunch of gravel outside. Raphael's head snapped toward the sound. He gestured for her to stay back, moving toward the entrance. The fog thickened, swallowing the edges of the ruins. Then, through the mist, a figure appeared, tall, sharp, and familiar. Victor Lang. Beautiful place, Victor said, his voice smooth as poison. Still smells like smoke. Raphael stepped forward, anger tightening his stance. You shouldn't be here. Oh, but I should, Victor said. You see, you left something behind that night. A secret even you didn't know. Alina's pulse quickened. What are you talking about? Victor smiled, and in that smile there was something cruelly triumphant. Lucia didn't die immediately. The fire took everything, but someone pulled her out, barely alive. Raphael froze. That's not possible. I buried her. No, Victor said. You buried a body that wasn't hers. We made sure of that. The consortium found her. They kept her alive, long enough to make her useful. The air shattered. Alina's voice came out barely a whisper. Useful how? Victor turned his gaze to her. They needed someone with her bloodline, someone to pay off Raphael's debts. They raised her in silence, renamed her, taught her to forget who she was. Raphael's heart thundered in his chest. What are you saying? Victor's smile widened. I'm saying, dear Raphael, you didn't fall in love with a stranger. He turned to Alina, eyes glinting like a blade. You fell in love with Lucia's daughter. The words hit like a storm breaking open the sky. Alina staggered back, her world tilting, her mind racing. No, that's not true. My mother died when I was a child. Victor's voice was calm, almost tender. That's what they told you. But your mother, Lucia Duarte, survived long enough to give birth. You! Raphael's knees nearly gave out. He stared at her, every breath scraping like glass in his throat. Alina? She shook her head, backing away from both men. No, that can't be. I have proof, Victor said, pulling a folded document from his coat. DNA, records, the adoption file. Your father, the man you thought sold you to Raphael, was paid by a consortium to keep you hidden, to make sure you'd one day end up here. The world around them seemed to stop breathing. The ruins, the rain, the ghosts, everything fell into a heavy silence. Raphael whispered, they planned this. Victor nodded. From the start. The contract, the sale, the debt, all of it. You were never the buyer, Raphael. You were the trap. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Alina whispered, my mother's name, Lucia Duarte. Raphael's voice broke. Lucia. Tears welled in her eyes. You loved her. He nodded. More than I could ever say. Then what are we, Raphael? She asked. What does that make us? He stepped forward slowly, the pain in his face unbearable. It makes us survivors of the same lie. Victor clapped slowly. Beautiful. Tragic. I almost hate to ruin it further. He pulled out a pistol, the metallic sound echoing through the ruins. But unfortunately, the consortium has decided your story ends here. Raphael moved fast, faster than Victor expected. He lunged, knocking the gun aside as a shot rang out, the sound ricocheting through the hollow mansion. Alina screamed. The world spun. Smoke, dust, and rain mixed with the smell of gunpowder and memory. When the haze cleared, Raphael was on the ground, blood spreading across his shirt. Victor stood over him, smirking. You always did have a hero complex. Alina grabbed a piece of debris, a broken metal rod, and swung with everything she had. It struck Victor's arm, sending the gun flying. She didn't stop. Years of fear and fury poured out of her as she struck again, forcing him back. Victor stumbled, lost his footing, and fell into the smoldering wreckage below the floor. The fire that had once ended a life now claimed another. Alina dropped the weapon and rushed to Raphael's side. "Stay with me," she whispered. He smiled faintly, blood staining his lips. "You have her eyes," he said. Tears blurred her vision. "Don't you dare leave me." His hand reached for hers, trembling. "You said you wanted the truth," he murmured. "Now you have it." Raphael. But before she could finish, his eyes fluttered shut. The storm outside finally broke, rain pouring to the shattered roof, washing away the smoke, the fire, the blood. But not the truth. In the ruins of the past, Alina knelt beside the man who had once been her captor, her savior, and maybe, impossibly, her destiny. And somewhere in the distance, as thunder rolled across the valley, the sun began to rise. The rain did not stop for 2 days. It fell over the valley like a requiem, soaking through the blackened stones of Villa Lucien, washing the blood from the earth, but not the memory from Alina's mind. She sat beside the fireless hearth, Raphael's coat wrapped around her shoulders, her face pale and unreadable. He was gone, or so they told her. The paramedics had taken his body at dawn, silent and efficient, their eyes averted as though afraid to meet hers. The local authorities came and went, asking questions that she answered by rote. A tragic accident, a gunman, fire, smoke, nothing more. But in her heart, she knew the truth wasn't finished. The consortium didn't stop with one death. They erased, they rebuilt, they rewrote. And somewhere in the depths of her grief, a new resolve began to take shape, sharper, colder, burning with purpose. When the sun finally broke through the storm clouds, Alina rose. She looked down at the ashes, the same ashes that had taken her mother and nearly taken her again, and whispered, "Not this time." Weeks later, she was in Geneva. The city glittered with wealth, every building a mirror reflecting another lie. She moved like a ghost through the marble corridors of power, dressed in black, her hair pinned with precision, her face unreadable. No one recognized her. To the world, she was now Elena Moretti, heiress to a quiet fortune, investor in international trade, nothing more. The consortium's reach was wide, but their arrogance made them predictable. They believed she was another pawn. They were wrong. Through a trail of coded messages and encrypted transfers, she found what she was looking for, the upcoming Council of Seven, a private gathering of the consortium's leaders, a meeting where they decided who lived, who vanished, and who profited from both, and she intended to walk straight into it. The night of the meeting, the air in the old chateau Dulis was heavy with opulence. Candles flickered in crystal holders. Waiters moved silently between men in black suits, each one carrying the kind of authority that came from money steeped in sin. At the head of the long mahogany table sat the man who had replaced Raphael as the consortium's regional head. His name was Silvio Cade, a name that carried more fear than fire. He was older than Victor, calmer, more deliberate, and infinitely more dangerous. When Alina entered, heads turned. Silvio's cold smile spread like oil across his face. "Ah, the widow Moretti," he said smoothly. "Or should I say the inheritor?" She met his gaze. "Steady. You can say whatever helps you sleep." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the room. She smiled faintly, playing her role perfectly. "I was told my late husband's shares in the consortium were still active." Silvio nodded. "Indeed, you have inherited a seat. But tell me, Mrs. Moretti, what could you possibly know about the work we do here?" "Enough to know you prefer your enemies dead and your allies indebted," she replied. "I'm here to settle Raphael's debts." A murmur went around the table. Silvio leaned back. And how exactly do you intend to do that? She reached into her bag and laid a small black drive on the table. With this, the room went silent. Every financial record from Blackridge Holdings to the offshore accounts in Panama, she said. Every illegal transfer. Every contract with governments you claim to own. Enough to destroy you 10 times over. Silvio's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. You've made a dangerous mistake. Alina smiled coldly. So did you? You underestimated the daughter of Lucia Duarte. For the first time, real fear flickered across his face. You think I didn't know? She said, her voice low, steady, deadly. You think I wouldn't dig into the past after Victor's death? The consortium raised me to be obedient. But my mother raised me to fight. You took everything from her, and from Raphael. I'm here to take it back. Silvio's hand twitched toward the guard at his side, but Alina was faster. She pressed a button on a slim remote in her palm. Screens along the wall flickered to life, showing the same data she just described. Bank records, wire transfers, photographs, contracts, all streaming live across encrypted servers. By now, she said, every major intelligence agency has received a copy. The rest are on a timed release. If anything happens to me, or if this room goes dark, the entire world will know who you are. The room erupted into chaos. Some shouted, some stood. One man bolted for the door. Silvio slammed his hand against the table. You think this will stop us? We built this world, girl. You can't destroy it. I don't need to destroy it, Alina said. I just need to remind it that monsters bleed. And then, from the shadows behind her, a voice said, she's right. The sound stopped her heart. It couldn't be. She turned. Raphael. He stepped into the light. Alive. Scarred, pale, but alive. The room seemed to collapse inward at the sight of him. Silvio's composure cracked. Impossible. Raphael's voice was calm, lethal. You should know by now that I don't die that easily. He moved to Alina's side, his eyes finding hers. You didn't think I'd let you fight them alone, did you? She couldn't breathe. For a heartbeat, everything else disappeared. The danger, the noise, the power. Only him. Silvio's fury erupted. You think this changes anything? He shouted. You're both already dead. Raphael's lips curved in a grim smile. Maybe, but so are you. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint at first, then louder. Blue and red light flashed through the chateau windows. Alina turned back to Silvio. Consider this my mother's last wish. As the authorities stormed in, she and Raphael stood side by side, watching as the empire of lies began to crumble. Men who had thought themselves untouchable were dragged from their seats. Silvio's screams echoed through the marble halls like the last gasp of an era. Hours later, the sun rose over Lake Geneva, calm and silver. Alina stood at the balcony of their rented villa, watching the light spill across the water. Raphael stood behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. I thought I lost you, she whispered. You almost did, he said. Victor's bullet missed my heart by an inch. I spent weeks under protection, waiting for the right moment to come back. She turned to him. You could have told me. He smiled faintly. You needed to become who you were always meant to be. If I had stayed, you'd still be running. Now, you're the one who ended it. Her eyes softened, the fire in them giving way to tears. And what now? He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Now we start over. No ghosts, no contracts, just us. She leaned into him, the lake wind brushing through her hair, the world finally quiet. But even as peace settled around them, Alina knew the story wasn't finished. The consortium had fallen, but power never truly dies. It only waits. And somewhere across another ocean, another name was being whispered in the shadows. Her name. The world was quiet again, but it was not the same world they had known. Silence no longer meant safety. It meant possibility. The morning after the fall of the consortium, Geneva glowed like a city newly reborn. The air was cold and clear, the kind that carried the scent of something unspoken, renewal, forgiveness, maybe even hope. Alina stood by the edge of the lake, her reflection trembling on the surface, like a memory deciding whether to stay or fade. The water mirrored the sky, blue and infinite, stretching farther than her past could reach. Behind her, footsteps crunched softly on the gravel. Raphael, his voice was low, still rough from pain. "You're up early." She smiled faintly. "I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the storm." He came to stand beside her, hands in his pockets, eyes on the horizon. "It's over now." "Is it?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time before answering. "Not completely. People like Silvio and Victor don't just disappear. Someone else will take their place." She turned to him, her hair catching the light. "Then we make sure they never rise again." He studied her. This woman who had once been a trembling girl sold into darkness. She had become steel and flame, beauty forged through fire. And though she carried the bloodline of his past, she was also the promise of his future. "You sound like a queen," he said softly. She smiled, but there was no pride in it, only truth. "Maybe I finally understand what it means to survive." They spent the next months rebuilding what the fire had taken. Not the mansions or the empire, but something smaller, quieter, more real. They bought a vineyard in Tuscany, on land where the air smelled of sun-warmed grapes and the hills curved like sighs. The house was modest. Terracotta walls, green shutters, a courtyard filled with roses. It was nothing like Villa Rosa, and that was the point. In the mornings, Alina walked barefoot to the rows of vines, the dew clinging to her skin. In the evenings, Raphael worked beside her, hands stained with soil instead of blood. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. Some wounds healed in silence. But the ghost never fully left. One night, as twilight bled across the sky, Alina sat by the window, watching fireflies drift like tiny lanterns over the vineyard. Raphael joined her, a glass of red wine in his hand. "Do you ever think of her?" she asked quietly. He knew who she meant. "Every day. But it's different now. When I think of Lucia, I don't see the fire anymore. I see her smile." Alina nodded, tracing a finger along the rim of her glass. "Do you think she'd hate us for this? For what we are?" He shook his head. "No, I think she'd understand. You were her hope, Alina, and somehow you became mine too." Tears welled in her eyes, glimmering in the candlelight. "Then maybe love isn't what I thought it was. Maybe it's not about innocence or beginning again. Maybe it's about choosing to live, even after everything." Raphael leaned closer, his hand finding hers. "Then we'll keep choosing." And when he kissed her, it wasn't the desperate collision of broken souls. It was quiet, reverent, a promise made in the language of forgiveness. Days turned into weeks, weeks into seasons. The vineyard flourished. Their names whispered not in fear, but in gratitude. They began to fund charity for women who had been sold, silenced, or broken by power. Every seed they planted, every vine that grew, became a testament to the lives they had reclaimed. Yet sometimes when the wind shifted just right, Alina swore she could still hear the faint echo of fire, not the kind that destroyed, but the kind that created. One evening, while sorting through old boxes, she found something, a locket, gold, worn, engraved with the initials LD inside was a tiny photograph of a woman with eyes just like hers. Lucia. Alina pressed the locket to her heart. For the first time, she didn't cry. Raphael found her like that, standing by the window, the last light of sunset on her face. "You found her," he said quietly. "She never really left," Alina whispered. "She just became part of everything." He nodded. "So did we—" Outside, the vineyard shimmered in the fading light. The air smelled of wine and earth, of endings that had learned how to become beginnings. Alina turned to him, her voice steady. "Do you ever wonder what comes next?" He smiled. "No, I just know that whatever it is, we'll face it together." Years later, when their story became rumor, the world remembered only fragments. A woman who had taken down an empire, a man who had once been feared and then vanished into quiet legend. But those who visited the vineyard spoke of something else, a feeling in the air, a strange peace, as if the land itself had forgiven its own fire. And if you asked the locals about the couple who lived there, they'd tell you the same thing, that the woman's laughter could make the vines bloom faster, that the man's gaze carried storms that never broke, and that at sunset, you could sometimes see them walking hand in hand between the rows. Two souls who walked through hell and chosen, again and again, to build heaven from its ashes. Epilogue, the last letter. Months after Raphael's passing years later, a letter arrived addressed in his handwriting. It had been sealed and left for her in his will. My Alina, if you're reading this, it means time has finally done what neither fire nor fate could. It has taken me from you. But don't mourn me. I lived twice because of you. When I first saw you, I thought I was being punished, a cruel reminder of what I'd lost. I didn't realize you were my redemption. You taught me that love isn't born from purity, but from survival, from the courage to look at the ruins and still believe something can grow there. Keep building, keep forgiving. And when you walk through the vineyard, remember that every vine carries a piece of both our stories, one written in ash, the other in bloom. Yours, always, Raphael. Alina folded the letter and placed it in the soil by the first vine they had planted together. The sun dipped below the hills, bathing the world in gold. And as the wind moved through the leaves, she smiled, not with sorrow, but with peace. Because even after everything, they had found what no empire, no fear, no fire could ever take away. They had found forever. And so, her story became more than survival. It became a reminder that even the most broken hearts can find their way back to light. She was once sold to the most feared man in America, but he never meant to fall in love. And yet, love found him anyway, not perfect, not easy, but real. Because sometimes, redemption isn't about forgetting the fire. It's about learning how to bloom from the ashes. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Hit the like button to help more hearts find the story. Share it with someone who still believes in second chances. And tell us in the comments, do you believe even the darkest souls can be saved by love? Your support keeps this channel alive, helping us bring more stories of pain, passion, and healing to life. So don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join our growing family of dreamers, believers, and storytellers from around the world. Until next time, keep believing in love, even when it feels impossible. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories are born from the ones that almost broke us.